Pod and Country is made possible by a grant from the William and Alice Hinckley Fund.
I am the Reverend Vanessa Rush Southern, the senior minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco. Welcome to Pod and Country. This is a place where we gather to look at UU values, Unitarian Universalists. We are a group of people who are creative, who are hopeful, and who are stubbornly determined to build the worlds we cannot live without, as we dismantle the worlds we cannot live within. I hope you'll join us in these conversations. The light's on. Come on in.
So come on in and grow your spirit, come on in. World of peace with liberty, come on in. Justice starts when all are valued, so let's begin. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Come on in, come on in, come on in.
Welcome back
to Pod and Country, an audio magazine for the spirit.
I'm the Mike.
And I'm the Mari.
And as always, we'll be meeting the folks who are building the pathways to beloved community.
And we'll have some music, poetry, and levity to sustain our spirits along the way.
Comedian Lenny Bruce once famously said, "In the halls of justice, the only justice is in the halls."
On this episode, we'll be focusing on our troubled immigration system and its effect on our ability to attain justice and equity and to foster pluralism.
We've titled it Justice, Not Just ICE.
To get perspective on the subject of immigration, we'll be interviewing Bill Ong Hing, Associate Dean for Faculty Scholarship, professor, and founding director of the Immigration and Deportation Defense Clinic, and Dean Circle Scholar at the University of San Francisco.
But there's more. We'll also be interviewing Reverend Stacy Craig for our State of the U Union segment on how our UU congregations are navigating in politically conservative areas.
Our musical guest is the ever-inspirational Francisco Herrera. Let's listen to the Reverend Vanessa Rush Southern in dialogue with Professor Bill Ong Hing.
Bill, it is so wonderful to have you here today, and we know that you are in high demand these days, so even more precious that you carved out time to be with us in this conversation.
Happy to be here. I've been to this church many times, and every time I've come in here, I've been happy to be here.
I'm glad. Well, we love to start with sort of the backstory of people before we leap into the present moment. And so I read where you were initially interested in pursuing housing issues for low-income communities, but landed a job in immigration law. So can you tell us a little bit more about what brought you to community-based advocacy?
Well, when I was in law school, I knew I wanted to work in Chinatown. I'm not from San Francisco, but for different reasons, when I was an undergraduate, I did some volunteer work in Chinatown. And when I attended University of San Francisco School of Law, I volunteered at what at that time was a legal aid office called San Francisco Neighborhood Legal Assistance Foundation. And it had an office right in the corner of Broadway and Columbus, which at that time was kind of the division between Chinatown and North Beach. In a way, it still is. And yeah, that first summer, I actually worked on a couple big cases, but most of the cases I worked on dealt with housing. The low-income tenants being disrespected by the landowners and mistreated, poor conditions. And I loved working on behalf of those clients, and that's what I wanted to do. And I actually did that work for 2.5 years as a law student.
But then you landed in immigration law, increasingly?
When I graduated from law school, that office was the first place I applied to work at, and they said, "Bill, we just don't have any openings in the housing unit, but we do have an opening in the immigration unit. And so would you be interested in that? And I said, well, I have no idea how to do immigration law. And they said, well, we trust you and we're hiring you. And so that's how I ended up being an immigration lawyer. It was what was open at the time.
It was fate or beautiful accident that worked for the universe.
Yeah, I'll buy that, right, yeah.
Well, immigration is such a large and complex issue, and it's hard to know where to start. One of your areas of expertise is migration theory. So to oversimplify, it's the study of why folks move from one place to another. Maybe we can start there?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've read a lot, and every year I go through new literature on the topic of migration theory. And the truth is that people sitting in their living room at home or around their kitchen table can probably come up with the 3 or 4 different reasons that people migrate. And they have often to do with fear of persecution. Their lives are disrupted. Sometimes it's family, that they want to be reunited with family members who have preceded them. Oftentimes it's economics. They can no longer find work in their neighborhood or even in their country, and so they look for other places. And more today, it's climate, that people are forced to give up on the farm that they've worked on for generations, their families, and for other reasons, and that's why they have to get up and move. And so, yeah, that probably is about a semester's worth of information. We do go into it a little bit deeper, and as academics, and I'm sure you have this background as well, as you know, as academics are, they'll find different things to study on each one of those topics. But those are the main reasons why people migrate and continue to.
Well, in 1979, you founded the Immigration Legal Resource Center, and one of the core pillars of its work is dismantling the arrest to deportation pipeline and disrupting racial disparities in immigration and criminal legal systems. It seems as important today as ever before. You say more about what you're seeing and doing right now?
Well, it's challenging. I've got to take a deep breath, and just as you read the description of some of the goals of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, you're right. They continue to be very important and vital. And let me just begin with the first part of what you described, and that has to do with a topic that most people in my field and fair-minded policymakers shy away from, and that's individuals who have gotten in trouble with the law, because I've been frustrated as recently as Barack Obama making speeches about how we're not going to deport families, we're going to deport criminals, without taking a pause to realize that criminals have families as well, and not understanding what I've come to understand after 50 years of doing this work, and a lifetime of growing up in a poor neighborhood, and knowing what my friends and neighbors have gone through, and that's that people have the ability to rehabilitate themselves, and that that people have the ability to see what they've done wrong and to come to terms and to change. And I firmly believe that. And again, that's not a popular issue, but for leaders to brand non-citizens as criminals per se, that of course is such an overbroad statement.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to it, right? If you look at the economics of the whole system and the coercion, right? There's economic coercion if you have people, who don't have adequate papers, they don't get adequate authorization to earn a living, legally.
It was so repulsive when President Bukele of El Salvador was sitting in the White House, in the Oval Office, I believe, with President Trump, and they were both mocking the situation. And Bukele was aw shucks, how could I possibly bring back a terrorist? And of course, none of these folks are terrorists of the group we're talking about who were sent to El Salvador. But we are also paying for the detention of children within our borders. Every day, we continue to separate children who are coming across the border from their aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. This is under Obama and Biden as well. We were upset when Donald Trump was separating children from their parents. Yeah, that sort of ended, but we continue to separate children from their grandmothers, siblings, cousins, older relatives, and I've been to those detention facilities. And that's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done, is interviewing children, and this was for a lawsuit, who were, I am not exaggerating, the youngest person that I witnessed at that facility that was taken away from her grandmother was 3 years old.
And being cared for in the facility by, oftentimes we saw the last time around, it was by a 9-year-old child who's also in the child detention facility.
Exactly right. And I remember these two siblings, a 4-year-old boy who was disabled, was cared for by his 9-year-old brother, and a pediatrician who was with me. We wondered, and she diagnosed that he had a learning disability, the 4-year-old. And so we wrote letters saying these two kids should not be separated because the 9-year-old knows how to take care of his 4-year-old brother. And yet there they were, fending for themselves in Clint, Texas, at a Border Patrol facility. And yeah, so we're paying for that, and that still goes on today.
You wrote a book, Humanizing Immigration, How to Transform Our Racist and Unjust System. And in that, you argue that U.S. immigration law, as you are now, right, and naming that it's inherently racist and unjust and shaped by structural biases against Black, Latinx, Asian, and other racially marginalized migrant communities. Can you give us another story, or a story that sort of illustrates that in ways that, I think are important to witness to together?
On Monday, I have been helping with a case for more than a year of a woman who is undocumented, married to a U.S. citizen vet. They have had 3 children. They're all adults now. The 2 of the older children are also disabled. One has a very, very serious learning disability and cannot care for himself. He's 28 years old, and so she cares for them, and so she was at an immigration hearing in San Bernardino, and she was applying for a waiver of the fact that she's been undocumented, but she was paroled in recently because she's the spouse of a vet. But she ran up against a law, we anticipated this, that she ran up against a law that if you have once been deported, which she was in 1998, and you re-entered without inspection, you're subject to a permanent bar of 10 years. This is different from something called a 10-year bar. This is a permanent bar for re-entering after deportation. And why was that law written? Well, just step back and think. These laws were written in the 80s and the 90s, the most recent iterations. The main people who were re-entering after deportation, for that matter, the main people who were entering without inspection were Mexicans, okay? The law doesn't say we're targeting Mexicans, but of course it's written because we were targeting Mexicans at the time those laws were written. But another example of the inherent racism, there's 2 things that I'll say. One is the backlogs. A lot of times people say, hey, why don't people just get in line? Well, first of all, there isn't a line for every person who wants to come here, but there is a line for certain relatives to immigrate. But relatives, for example, for siblings of U.S. citizens or for adult children of U.S. citizens, those wait lists are 20 years long. and
It's short for parents, as I think
parents
I
of
heard
U.S.
out.
citizens.
Yeah.
There's actually not a wait list for parents of U.S. citizens if the citizen's over 21. But again, why is that? Well, that's because the laws were structured in a way that at the time the systems were put in place in the 1960s, we actually didn't want many Asians immigrating to the United States. So the biggest backlogs in those countries today are China, South Korea, India, and some Latin countries. Mexico has a big backlog. But the original laws were intended to restrict the number of Asians. This was after the Chinese exclusion law was eliminated, but we still didn't want so many Asians coming in. And the other law that I'd point out is that two hypotheticals, very quickly. Let's say two people are undocumented and they both marry U.S. citizen spouses, both legitimate marriages. The person who entered on a visitor's visa and maybe overstayed their visitor's visa or student visa for 20 years, they can immediately apply for a green card without having to leave the country because they're married to a U.S. citizen. On the other hand, somebody who entered without inspection across the border, exact same thing, married as a U.S. citizen, legitimate, they cannot apply for their green card in the United States. They have to leave the country. And once they leave the country, they're subject to a 10-year bar if they've been here for more than 1 year undocumented. Again, that was targeting Mexicans as well. We want to punish them because they came across the border often under recruitment efforts by agribusiness. And do I need to say anything else? I mean, it's a setup it's a trap for many of those individuals.
So is part of your push to have us eliminate the entire deportation business, in both senses of that word, because the system is so convoluted, inhumane, messy, has buried, not so buried for you and people who know the system, racial kind of instigations behind seemingly neutral laws, that to straighten it out, like there is no straightening it out in a way that is humane and universally kind of noble and worthy of us?
Put replay on what you just said, because that's exactly the reason I would just throw out the whole kit and caboodle. And to me, it really comes down to the lack of humanity that's just doesn't exist in our current system. Show me any part of the system, and I'll show you a system that either has inherent racism in it or it allows for the decision makers, those in authority, the agents, it allows them to be abusive. I just am sick and tired of every day seeing the abuse that takes place. I'm on a Signal group that's monitoring the immigration court activities every day at 630 Sansom Street and 100 Montgomery, and those are just the local addresses of the immigration courts. And for the last 3 weeks, it's been so inconsistent. People walking in who don't know if they're going to be arrested, and they're accompanied by people that you know who are incorporating their accompany program, not just religious organizations, but other community-based organizations. And right from under their noses.
Well, and also because if you have someone who's accompanying you and witnessing the hearing, it's been proven that you have a much greater chance of being approved or getting a fair hearing, right?
Absolutely. And so that has helped in the last few weeks avoid some people getting arrested, but not 100%.
Yeah.
And the poor soul, that is out there on his or her own and is walking into the building and doesn't have that. Now, people are trying to fill in and identify those folks, but it's like, can we do this every day, day in, day out? And some people are committed to doing it, but why should we need that?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So let me step back and say, okay, so, and we have a country, one of whose unspoken sacred values is fairness, right? To your point, this isn't a fair system, but how do we create a fair system? And we have a right as a nation, unless we become a borderless world, which there are advocates for, and we could talk about that in another conversation together. How do we maintain some sense of control and integrity about our borders. What does that look like? I mean, I know we don't have time for all of it, but can you spin out some of what that new imagining might look like?
Yeah, I am not opposed to putting restrictions on the number of immigrants each year. I mean, but let's talk about that number. What I am opposed is to differentiating between different parts of the world. Yeah, we can screen people and we can come up with a set of values to screen individuals, but I'm repeating what I said initially. But I also come from a position of fairness and understanding that people can better themselves and make reforms in their own lives. And so I am pretty close to open borders. I just want you to understand that, okay? Because my understanding, based on studies by economists and people who know economies of different countries, is that for a while,
Is it going to be like the invisible hand of immigration, like Adam Smith's invisible hand in economics? Is that
very
the
much
idea?
part of that, because after a while, things settle. And I know the European Union was not perfect, but that was a big concern when the EU first came to being. And less than 2%, this was even when UK was part of the EU, that less than 2% of folks actually moved.
That's
and
interesting.
relocated from one country to another. But what they did was very smart.
But they had economic support for the right?
Exactly.
Like Greece, when they entered, got support, right? That was part of the argument against letting certain countries enter, because you would have to
They
give them
invested.
significant.
Countries like Spain and even Ireland got huge, massive investments. And those countries that had been immigrant-sending countries no longer became immigrant-sending countries. Because one thing is true with everyone I've ever met, and that's people would rather stay home.
Yes.
They would rather be home, secure in their homeland, work there, know their friends and neighbors. And so we would be smart to, rather than investing the billions of dollars that we have in the immigration system, which I would dismantle, and border enforcement, let's
Yes.
spend it wisely. Let's figure out how to work with
Well,
countries.
we're just undoing that legacy of even trying to help, right?
Let me give you an example that a lot of immigration lawyers have experienced. We are put in a position when we're representing someone in asylum claim of essentially dumping on the country from which the person came, because we're trying to say, oh, it's totally unsafe there. And it's not true. Our clients are afraid because of particular things, and they have legitimate asylum claims from our perspective, but they still love their country.
Yes.
And they still miss parts of it, much of it, especially their families, right? And so we've learned that when we make our asylum claims on behalf of, just name the country, and we've represented people from all over the world, not just Central America. And so we're careful, we're respectful of our clients, that when we make our claims, the country conditions that we introduce, we vet that information with the client to make sure that they are comfortable with what we're saying and contextualizing their experience with what's happening there. Because they don't want people to think that their country's a godforsaken place. They have lovely memories of it. They want it to be better, and they wish they could be safe there. But, so we take chances in not just dumping entirely on nations,
And also not buying into that narrative, right?
Exactly.
We are the promised land, and right, and
100%
we will
right.
welcome you. White man's burden, noblesse oblige. We will welcome you, and you play to that trope, and you have a better chance of being accepted.
Exactly right. Yeah, I couldn't say it
I love
better.
that you do
Yeah.
that. I think that's
Right.
beautiful. I mean, I've been thinking as you've been talking about, so much of what you've been saying is our loss of ability to do nuance as a nation. Nuance about what it means to be human, and nuance about what it means to migrate, and nuance about who we want to be, and just that expansive trust in our ability to navigate nuance is part of what's at the heart of all of this.
The law appears to be so black and white that there is not room for that. But I love the way that you put that, because, for example, just the way the border has been defined the last several years, I think that it was a lost opportunity for any leader of the country, but especially Biden and Obama, that they bought into the narrative of the folks at the border. They've been commodified. That it's just they represent this evil somehow that's about to overrun our country, taking little time to explain who these individuals are, why they are there. I really think it was a lost opportunity, and it allowed the politics to take over, and for the average American voter to buy into this concept of, oh my gosh, there's so many people there, and who's in these caravans, and they're people that are going to probably come here and they're loaded with terrorists, and it's
And
the
mostly to
furthest thing
score
from the truth.
political points, right? Fear is a great motivator for consolidating power and,
Right.
and nuance and humanity.
Can we take the time? Does the American public have the patience to actually step back and digest this? And I choose to believe that the vast majority of Americans are capable of that, and that we have to take the time to do that. And that's part of my responsibility. It's part of everyone's responsibility who is an ally in this fight that we are up against right now.
Say more about that. Spell that out a little more. It's our responsibility to do what?
It's our responsibility to put a human face on the folks that we're working with and that we're working for, on behalf of.
And tell their stories. And
story after story after story. In the next few days, for example, I'm meeting with organizers who are trying to come up with a theory on how to regain temporary protected status that the Trump administration is attacking. There's a threat to DACA that is likely to end sometime within the next year for that subgroup of dreamers and others. And honestly, my strategy to those organizers is, let's bring people to the table who are affected. Let them tell their stories, because that is what is going to make the difference, I believe, to policymakers and to the voters and to the people in the middle or who are seemingly apathetic or don't care about this, because it's our responsibility to day in, day out, make sure that the American voter, that the American public understand that we are dealing with real human beings who have families, who have very similar values to what we all claim to have, and that they're very much like our own forefathers and our generations before us. There's very little difference. Could be a difference in color, but in terms of values and aspirations, 100% similar.
But there's the secondary piece about pitching stories that I also hear in what you're saying, and like the stories that we choose to tell. That feels hard for me unless we create other outlets. Like just this morning reading the New York Times, there was the story of the Canadian citizen in Miami, I think it was, who got arrested. And, and then you read into the story, and this person had been arrested for and served, I guess, some time for selling drugs on one or two occasions. I mean, so those are the stories the press wants to tell, right? So how do we get the good? How do we get the stories that are not that are the ones that are more common?
That's a good question, and I try to pitch stories to the different journalists that I have, and sometimes they bite, sometimes they don't. But the reporters finally, they're going to talk about the racism in a couple stories related to that issue. Right.
Well, what can we do? So it sounds like it's a layered problem. It's interlaced with other systemic problems like the criminal justice system in general, even our fundamental framework of understanding one another and who we want to be as a nation, maybe a spirit of grace versus punitiveness, simple binaries. Like there's so much playing into it that's complicated, that's hard to put our hands around. But what can we do? What should we be doing?
Well, what I'm about to say is nothing new, and we alluded to one earlier, is volunteer for the accompaniment programs if you are able to do that. And some of these other things are quite typical. Well, let me say this. On May 1st, 2006, there was a revolt across the country. Something had passed the House called the Sensenbrenner bill that had awful provisions in it, including, believe it or not, a bounty provision that if somebody turned in an undocumented immigrant to the old immigration service, that they could get $1,000 bounty for turning in an undocumented immigrant.
Wow.
Well, anyway, so freeways were shut down on May 1st, 2000, across the country. San Jose 101 down there, Los Angeles, Manhattan, and it was wonderful. But there was, and that bill never got passed, but that all kind of died, and I thought that would never happen again, but it did happen again. It happened again 2 weeks ago on June 14th when everyone was out there in the streets. We actually need more of that because mass protests do make a difference. I'm of the anti-Vietnam War era, okay? I was in Berkeley during that time, and it made a difference, and I think that we need to do more of that. And what I like about it is that while not everyone on the street was there for immigrant rights, they were there for all the other reasons that the Trump administration has attacked. Well, this is an opportunity for that kind of collaboration to take place. So we actually need that. And those of us who live in a safe bubble like San Francisco, well, we need to call our relatives in red states and tell them how we feel. Because, and I confess that I grew up in Arizona and I've got a lot of work there on my hands to call my conservative relatives who watch Fox News. And so, but we need to do that. It's those things are going to matter. And I do think that we need to put political heat on different parts of the country to realize that we're talking about real people and real lives here.
So what I hear you say is tell the stories, humanize the issue as much as possible. Talk to people in your circle of, love and friendship who are in places where there needs to be even more activism than there is, and they need to know and have help understanding the issues, or at least how you feel about it, to the extent conversion happens in those conversations of honest love between people who respect each other. And volunteer locally. Show up in the streets, show up in the courts as an accompaniment, person who helps someone get through the system as safely as is possible in a broken system. And
Yes.
Pray. That's
Absolutely. Right. We need all the help we can get from every quarter of the universe. Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you also just for a lifetime of service to the ideals of our nation and the people who are caught up in the places where we're fighting to make sure that they get what they deserve and the justice and equity and compassion that we have as our ideals actually get lived out. And I hope that we'll be, as we have been in this congregation with you, in partnership as you see a way forward that we can lean into as people of faith. So.
Well, thank you for the invitation and thank you for your leadership and your example. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Each episode, we bring you a dash of comedy from The Mike and Mari Show, featuring Michael Bossier and Mari Magaloni Ramos. In keeping with our episode theme, we offer you this bit of satire, titled Ice Ice Baby.
You have reached the offices of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. For English, say 1. For Spanish, say 2.
1.
I heard 2. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. We have traced your point of origin. ICE will be arriving at your location in 3 minutes.
Wait, I said 1. English. English.
Okay. Did you know that you can find answers to all of your questions by going to ice.org/answers?
I want to speak to an agent.
Great. Before I connect you, we're offering the T1 Mega Maga Gold Phone at the special price of $1984 and no cents. If you order now, we'll give you a queen-size MyPillow for an additional $17.76 shipping and handling.
No.
Yes. We have deducted these funds from your Social Security and enrolled you in autopay.
How did you get that information? I bet it was Doge.
I heard Doge. Transferring you to Elon Musk.
I don't want to talk to Elon Musk.
You have reached the personal message system of Elon Musk. To buy a Tesla cheap, press 1. To talk to Big Balls, press 2. If you're one of Elon's baby mamas, press 3.
I want to speak to an agent.
How about a Cybertruck?
I don't want a Tesla. Speak to an agent.
Okay. To get you to the right person, say what you are having problems with. Speak in complete sentences. I can understand you.
Human being.
That is not a complete sentence. A complete sentence would be, the little wooden boy went to school and ate his little wooden lunch. You qualify for our English as a second language for people who already speak English program. To purchase a school voucher, press 1.
No.
Although no is a complete sentence, your attitude is triggering me. I no longer wish to be subjected to your hostility. Goodbye.
Wait. I need to speak to an ICE agent.
Connecting. Due to an unexpected call volume, the average wait time is between 15 minutes and a week from Tuesday.
Look, I demand to speak to an agent, and I mean now.
Would you like to hang up and call back at a better time?
A better time? Like what?
Never. How about never?
No, I need to speak to someone now.
Transferring now.
Finally.
To speak to an inmate in El Salvador, press 1. To speak to an inmate in Gitmo, press 2. If you wish to speak to an agent, say, agent, please.
Agent.
I did not hear please.
Please, agent, please.
That's better. Transferring now.
At last.
Hello.
Hello. Thank God, a human being. You would not believe how long I was stuck in this phone tree hell. Look, this is an emergency. I'm at the Kennedy Center to see Shakira, and she was just dragged off stage by 3 masked men. I paid $1,500 for these tickets.
You paid $1,500 for Shakira? We'd like to offer you an opportunity to get in on the ground floor of the new Mega Towers in Djibouti, transferring you to Deutsche Bank.
Oh, no, don't. Look, I'm a taxpayer. I demand to speak to your manager.
Your stick-to-itiveness is impressive. As a reward, ICE is offering American citizenship to Friends of MAGA with our special Golden Visa card. For only $5 million, you can retrieve the deportee of your choice. Your friend or family member can be returned with just 5 easy payments of $1 million.
No!
Yes.
On our last episode of Pod and Country, we featured singer-songwriter Francisco Herrera. Last month, Mari, Cal, and I attended his concert in San Francisco, but his team was forced to have attorneys stationed at the concert because of fear of an ICE presence. People were joined together in joy and song, but with the specter of a nebulous immigration enforcement policy hanging over our heads. In song, Francisco had a word of caution to those who were threatened. And in this spirit, we offer the song to you. Because it's sung in Spanish, I can offer a rough translation to English, and I quote, "We don't have to show any ID, much less to ICE, or the police for that matter. And if they stop, well, you know just what to do. We have the right to remain silent. We have the right to call a lawyer. We don't have to sign anything. For sure, it will be for your deportation." As you know, music is a universal language, but my Spanish is a little sketchy. Mari, can you help?
The album is called Honor Migrante, and the song is called Saber ante la migra.
Hace unos días iba yo con mi familia, los 3 chiquillos y mi esposa a lavar, cuando de pronto que nos cayó la migra, pensando que nos iba a deportar. Pidió papeles y le importó muy poco si mi familia se quedaba abandonada. Pero por eso tenga o no tenga papeles, hay que saber sus derechos para poderse defender. No tenemos que mostrar ningún papel. No tenemos que decirle nada a nadie, menos a la amiga, menos a la amiga. Y si la agarran, usted ya sabe qué hacer. Tenemos derecho de mantener silencio, tenemos derecho de hablarle a un abogado. No tenemos que firmar ni un documento, porque seguro es para la deportación. Si ve a la migra ojeando por la calle, siga adelante como si no existiera, porque aunque buscan a quien se ve latino, persiguen a quien empiece a correr. Póngase trucha, tenemos el derecho de andar sin ninguna identificación. Sea cordial y no de información, que la tranquilidad puede ser su salvación. No tenemos que mostrar ningún papel, no tenemos que decirle nada a nadie, menos a la migra, menos a la migra. Y si la agarran, usted ya sabe qué hacer. Tenemos derecho de mantener silencio, tenemos derecho de hablarle a un abogado. No tenemos que firmar ni un documento, porque seguro es para la deportación. Ay, 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 trucha raza, que tenemos mucho más derecho del que nos damos cuenta. Órale, hágalo valer, usted también paga impuestos, sobres. Es cierto que es muy bonita la confianza, pero la migra de ella se aventaja. Tratan de usar el miedo o la amistad para así ver qué información le sacan. Solo la unión sabemos que es la fuerza de nuestra tierra, nunca nos van a sacar. Tenemos mucho más poder del que pensamos, pronto nos educamos y cambiamos hoy la ley. ¡Órale! No tenemos que mostrar ningún papel, no tenemos que decirle nada a nadie, menos a la migra, menos a la migra. Y si la agarran, usted ya sabe qué hacer. Tenemos derecho de mantener silencio, tenemos derecho de hablarle a un abogado. No tenemos que firmar ni un documento, porque seguro es para la deportación.
In each episode of Pod and Country, we like to include a segment called State of the U Union. In this segment, we talk to other UU churches located in more conservative areas of the country in order to gain a better understanding of what is happening and how our sibling congregations are thinking about and acting within their community. In this episode, we have a fun chat with the Reverend Stacy Craig. Reverend Stacy serves two congregations, one in Wisconsin and the other in Chico, California. She describes her ministry as that of being an eco-chaplain in service of our environment, for it is there that we meet each other on what is truly common ground.
Reverend Stacy Craig, welcome and to Pod and Country. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Reverend, we really love to get to know each of you who come for this segment for State of the U Union. And I was actually reading about you. This is the first time we get to speak to each other. So you are the Reverend in two different fellowships. Tell us about that.
Yes, I serve, so I'm full-time, but half-time with two smaller, fairly, rural areas. One is in northern Wisconsin. It's called the Chequamegon Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, right on the shores of Lake Superior. And they're new to the game. You know, they started meeting in a church basement and then a library basement in the late 90s and became a UU fellowship in 2004. So they have a burgeoning youth program. They have 40 youth last year signed up. So it is this anomaly of what most religious communities are experiencing. I'm also the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Chico, California. This was partially due to circumstances. I had a job lined up and it fell through, and I was looking for other things and thought, well, there's this great learning we had during the pandemic where we started doing more things online. And some fellowships that were having a harder time or had part-time ministries, were having a harder time attracting an in-person minister, have moved to these different kinds of arrangements, very creative. And UUFC in Chico is one of those fellowships. So I fly out about once a month and do most of the other work online with them.
How is that traveling going for you?
So I don't love, I mean, traveling is its own thing, and but I am, I am benefiting so much from getting to experience multiple UU communities. I'm learning so much about what some have warned me is called California spirituality, and I feel like I'm very at home in this in this world. I love that the UU Fellowship in Chico has a strong earth-based and nature, recognizing the cycles of nature and services that recognize those. It's a community that was really founded on social justice. So I believe they were the first to hire a settled African American minister as part of their heritage, and they've had big swings of social justice action throughout their history, and it feels like a great fit because I'm a climate change chaplain at heart. Like, that's the way I self-identify, and so the flying is really not something that feels good for me, right? Because it is so carbon intensive. And yet, I feel called to this ministry. I am learning about the recovery of the campfire, one of the deadliest fires in history that happened just down the road from Chico, and that changed the town overnight. I'm learning so much about the resiliency and recovery of the human spirit as it relates to a changed climate. And I feel like these are lessons we all need to be hearing and sharing and digesting for the future.
So you talked about California spirituality, and I'm curious to know how it is different from the spirituality in Wisconsin that you find, and how you maneuver between the two, and how they feed each other.
Yes. What's so remarkable is there's so much more in common between the two fellowships. And I sometimes, almost giggle to myself thinking about how well people would get along. I sort of see almost archetypes in the fellowships that are playing similar roles. And one thing, northern Wisconsin is a little bit removed from the Midwest, but still very much has those Midwest values. What's so interesting about Chico is I see a lot of those similar Midwest values in that town as well. So they're all blended, but the two communities that I serve have many things in common. They are both oriented in areas that have natural beauty and are sort of advertised as part of the way that they attract people to them is because they have a lot of wonderful outdoor pursuits. So in northern Wisconsin, it's sea kayaking on Lake Superior. There's canoeing, fly fishing. There is a lot of sustainable agriculture. There's arts and culture. There's a lot of artists in this region. It's an area where a lot of people came to homestead. So you still have these back to the landers in northern Wisconsin. And you also have like big agriculture and commercial fisheries. And you have a variety, and it's very post-industrial. So, northern Wisconsin was going to be the next Chicago, but every single tree was cut and every single, ore that was possible to get out of the ground was taken, and the brownstone was mined, and it all left. And when it was gone, all of the industries left, leaving this area in quite desolation. So what has happened here in the recovery of northern Wisconsin in particular is part of the story of this fellowship being part of this land and serving this land and the people, as well as the water. You know, it's such a big focus. We really talk about the lake as a person, she. You know, she is beautiful and powerful and terrifying and awe-inspiring. And many people have spiritual practices related to the water, whether it's letting the waves move through them and feeling that universal energy. I know one of our engineers has talked about that as part of his spiritual practice, to, you know, sailing, all kinds of ways that people really engage with nature on that level. And Chico is, you know, has the largest, one of the largest municipal parks in the country. They have Bidwell Park that goes through town, and it is expansive. I mean, there is walking every day I've been there. There is a swimming pool. A city swimming pool is the river. And it's a section of the river that's been dammed, and there's part of it that's paved, and it gets cleaned out, but that's where the children swim. That's where I swim. There's swimming holes in the river all the way up throughout Upper Bidwell Park. You know, the fellowship has a walking group, and a couple of times a week, they get up early in the morning and walk the nature trails that are literally 5 minutes from downtown. They have a Mediterranean growing climate that just means that sustainable agriculture and healthy living and active living are a priority. So the two fellowships are situated in these areas that are remarkably similar and also very different. You know, both having agricultural roots, both having these real blends of liberal and conservative populations, and community building and the arts being on, you know, a part of that in both as well.
Say a little bit more. That's interesting. Say a little bit more about the blending of the conservative and the more liberal populations, maybe in both geographies in which you are serving. We'd love to hear more about how does that work. Well,
Yeah, so one of the main differences is that Chico is over 100,000 people, whereas Ashland, Wisconsin is less than 10,000. So there is a bit of a population and rural difference, but also the characteristics are still quite similar, because I experienced Chico as a smaller town. It feels that way. Yes, so one of the things that you find often, or that I've experienced in both places, is that the social services that are the safety net for so many vulnerable populations are just stretched thin, as it, you know, from the get-go. There's just not a lot of safety nets for folks. Family systems, church systems, religious communities, all of them provide critical support for one another. Within this, when you have politics at the county level, at the city level, at the school board level, they often, you know, you see the pendulum swing from conservative to liberal based on the leadership, but often in both areas, it's a more conservative local government that are making decisions. And one of the things that I find is compelling about having a UU fellowship in these communities is because when you have more conservative local governments, some of those policies that maybe are, you know, seeing and caring for trans people, are seeing and caring for people that are living below the poverty line, that are seeing and caring for people with disabilities, and definitely those who are immigrants or who are refugees. Those are often policies that don't exist in, you know, in these administrations. And so it becomes the responsibility and the call of the Unitarian Universalist fellowships in these areas to play a much more prominent role in being part of that safety net, being part of that holding of the interdependent web of which we need one another.
So I attended a webinar put on by the Unitarian Universalist Association that had the title Facing the Apocalypse with a Smile. The moderator, Rachel Mislivy, was bringing forward the premise that we're unlikely to be able to shame and scare people into taking climate change seriously, and then, of course, affect the changes necessary to address it. What are your thoughts on that?
What you just described, that we're trying to find ways to, for so long, the environmental movement in particular, it was like, we're all going to die. Human beings are the problem. Extinction is happening. And it was just like, who wants to come to that party? Like, I don't want to be, like, how can I, and we all have things happening in our own lives. We all carry traumas and tragedies. We all are working on priorities and intentions, and to just know that that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to. This is what I love about especially our emerging UU communities, and where this living tradition is going. Because I think one of the messages that I hear at UU communities is, come, this is a refuge. This is a safe space, but we're not afraid to get uncomfortable. We're not afraid to have hard conversations. And not only that, but we're going to do something about it. We're not going to, one of my values, my personal values, having worked in the environmental movement and working with lots of nonprofits over the years, one of my values is efficacy. I just love getting things done. I am all about process. I am all about, communities and conversations, but how many times do things just get stuck in a binder and get stuck in a file and don't ever make it to the light of day, don't ever show their beautiful face of change and possibility and movement and action. And so that's also happening in UU communities, especially with the new covenants that are happening amongst individuals and collectively. I feel that there was a lot of time that maybe we got stuck arguing semantics, and semantics matters. And we were focused on just the 1% that we weren't agreeing on, and not the 99% that was unifying us in around Unitarian Universalist tables and sanctuaries. So I'm just so excited for this movement because I'm seeing the engagement. I'm seeing it being done with sort of a trauma-informed lens, right? That we can't be having conversations about climate crisis without meeting people where they are, which is everyone's being impacted and everyone's lives are, having to adapt at levels that we've never seen before. And this is just one of the many global, travesties that's happening. So, is there a soundbite that would bring people around the table? And for me right now, the soundbite and like where my focus is, come and take refuge. You are welcome here. You don't have to wear a mask. You can be your authentic self. As long as you are willing to be in community together, because I breathe the air that you exhale, and you breathe the air that I exhale. We are interconnected, and there's nothing we can do about it. So maybe we could start living like it.
Reverend Stacy Craig, it has been absolutely wonderful to meet you and to speak with you. Your words they couldn't be more more true and more beautiful and more grounded in love. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a real pleasure and an honor, and I'm gonna say your words. Come, this is a refuge, this is a safe space, but we're going to do something about it. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Well, I will be following you all, and I'm going to go back. I can't wait I just started them last night, like as I was driving to and from this Interfaith Pride service. So I was kind of like in the car and, multitasking, but I'm going to have some time to dwell with these, and just looking forward to following you going forward.
Welcome to the segment we call The Dance. On this episode about immigration, we bring you the poem Psalm by Wisława Szymborska. It was translated from Polish by Stanislaw Baranczak and Claire Kavanaugh. Oh, the leaky boundaries of man-made states! How many clouds float past them with impunity? How much desert sand shifts from one land to another? How many mountain pebbles tumble onto foreign soil in provocative hops? Need I mention every single bird that flies in the face of frontiers or alights on the roadblock at the border? A humble robin, still its tail resides abroad, while its beak stays at home. If that weren't enough, it won't stop bobbing. Among innumerable insects, I'll single out only the ant, between the border guard's left and right boots, blithely ignoring the questions where from and where to. Oh, to register in detail at a glance the chaos prevailing on every continent. Isn't that a privet on the far bank, smuggling its 100,000th leaf across the river? And who but the octopus, with its impudent long arms, would disrupt the sacred bounds of territorial waters? And how can we talk of order over all when the very placement of the stars leaves us doubting just what shines and for whom? Not to speak of the frogs' reprehensible drifting, and dust blowing all over the steps as if they hadn't been partitioned, and the voices coasting on obliging airwaves, that conspiratorial squeaking, those indecipherable mutters. Only what is human can truly be foreign. The rest is mixed vegetation, subversive moles, and wind.
Well, that's almost it.
What do you mean almost it? Oh, you mean it's time to thank our guests, Professor Bill Ong Hing, Reverend Stacy Craig, and our musical guest, Francisco Herrera.
Yeah, but that's not it.
Right. We still need to thank our house band, the Tiger Club, our producer, Cal Ball, and Reverend Vanessa Rush Southern.
Yeah, but that's not it either.
Of course. Silly me. I forgot to thank Alicia Cover and Jonathan Silk for the tech support, and the Reverends Allison Jacks and Laura Shenham for their guidance and for help finding us amazing people to interview.
Well, that's it, but it's not it.
All right, I give up. What is it?
Well, as the folks in Podland know, Pod and Country is made possible by a generous grant from the William and Alice Hinckley Fund.
Yeah, is that it?
Well, yes, but that's not it. We're reaching the end of our grant money, and to continue to produce this podcast in the manner of which folks have grown accustomed, we'd like to reach out to any billionaire whose name doesn't rhyme with Tusk and ask them to visit uusf.org and go to the donate button marked for Pod and Country to keep these episodes going.
It does take over 60 hours to produce a 60-minute episode, not to mention the time it takes to wrangle our great interviewees and the time it takes to do research and to write everything.
So to all you billionaires out there,
would we accept money from millionaires?
We would accept money from hundredaires.
Or if you're just a nickel and dimer like me, please review and like us on your favorite listening platform and tell a friend.
Or you could simply tell a friend to tell a billionaire.
Yeah, that too. It's time for the final word. Vanessa, take us home.
I am recording this reflection on July 3rd, 2025, the day before the day our nation commemorates the 249th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. This is the document that begins when, in the course of human events, that was largely written by Thomas Jefferson, it became the founding creed of America. The Constitution, the structure of government, and laws were supposed to be a frame around it, give its vision and calling shape and heft and muscle. The Declaration of Independence began with a list of the wrongs of King George III, 27 bullet points of abuse of power. These included, quote, "He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance." And this list goes on. "In every stage of these oppressions," they wrote, "we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people." And so they acknowledged their right, our right, to abolish any allegiance to the crown and began the work of constituting their own government rather than submit. What would inform that work, however, came at the start of the Declaration. It was a short list of grounding principles that would be their North Star, things so clear that the 5 men who drafted the Declaration all agreed those truths could be called, quote, self-evident, end quote. And they were, these old, familiar words, still true, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What made us great as a nation when we are and have been great, and what will make us great always, was not that we lived those words and commitments perfectly, we never have, but that at our best we held them as that North Star in front of us as we navigated our way forward, that we would be a people who anchored in unswerving concern for one another's lives, cherishing the sacred power of liberties like freedom of speech, protected them with laws and in courts of law that were fair and just, and that we acknowledged the shared desire to be happy, free of fear and want. "Give me," as Emma Lazarus wrote in the poem etched on the statue that greeted those who arrived in New York's harbors, my mother among them, "give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." In 1776, we started the great experiment, gorgeous, audacious, and divinely inspired in its scope. It began. May we be recalled to that call, to the work of this land, as Langston Hughes described it, that, quote, "yet must be." Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again next month. The light's on. Come on in.
Come on in. World of peace with liberty. Come on in. Justice starts when all are valued. So let's begin. Now come on in, come on in.